At age 6, I often questioned why the streets of my hometown, Ulaanbaatar, were filled with dust and litter. I would apprehensively watch as my peers left their candy wrappers and empty soda cans on the soil of our neighborhood playground, but my childhood self shrugged the unease off, consumed with the intensity of tag or cops and robbers, and went about our day. At age 10, I learned that it was not okay to pollute your surroundings, that if your friends are littering, tell them not to, because the waste would last on our earth for up to thousands of years. I also noticed that each winter in UB, dark clouds of smog would veil the city, and the smell of burning coal would soak into your hair, your scarf, and your skin. I wondered why this was. But by age 14, I found the answer to my question. The air pollution, the excessive waste, the moral negligence of humanity were all contributing to a phenomenon called climate change. According to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change is attributed directly or indirectly to human activity that alters the composition of the global atmosphere. Now, the majority of this human activity comes from the increased production of greenhouse gases due to the burning of fossil fuels, deforestation, industrial farming, and other processes. As the greenhouse gases such as CO2, methane, and nitrogen oxide are released into the air, they trap the heat from the sun in the Earth's atmosphere, thereby warming the planet and perpetuating climate change in a process known as the greenhouse effect. Now, according to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's 2021 assessment report, human influence has warmed the climate at a rate that is unprecedented in at least past 2,000 years. Researchers at the US Global Change Program say that the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere has increased more than 50% since the Industrial Revolution. This has corresponded to a 1.1 degree Celsius increase in the global average temperature in the past 200 years. But wait, you might be asking to yourself, 1.1 doesn't seem too bad in the past 200 years, but for something as big as our atmosphere, as our world, a single degree of warming kicks off a dangerous cycle of impacts. Intense floods and hurricanes sweep through countries such as Bangladesh and Vietnam, obliterating entire infrastructures and communities. Heat waves suffocate thousands of people and animals in countries such as France and Australia. Droughts breed hunger and conflict in developing countries such as India and Somalia as crop failures continue to arise. And now the Earth is facing a time of extreme extinction as up to 150 animal species go extinct every day. Under all this destruction, families are being forced to flee their homes as climate refugees. These are the ramifications of human-induced climate change. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said that the IPCC's assessment report was nothing less than a code red for humanity. The alarm bells are deafening, and the evidence is irrefutable. He noted that the previously agreed upon 1.5 degree threshold was dangerously close to exceeding, and to prevent this threshold from being passed by at our glance, we need to step up our actions. We must pursue the most ambitious path. So what exactly is this most ambitious path? Humanity has been aware of human-induced climate change as early as the 18th century, when scientists first argued that human emissions of greenhouse gases could change the climate. But the first time that world leaders actually came together to make decisive actions against climate change was during the Paris Agreement, a legally binding international treaty on climate change that was adopted by 192 countries in 2015 to limit global warming to well below 2, preferably to 1.5 degrees Celsius compared to pre-industrial levels. Following this landmark agreement, public awareness regarding climate change substantially increased. Nowadays, people often want broad climate policies beyond the current state of play, according to a global survey organized by the UNDP. The majority of the survey's participants, which covered half the world's population, backed more renewable energy, they supported conserving forests and land, and they backed more use of clean electric cars and buses. Today, more than ever, we see youth being increasingly engaged in climate justice, from Greta Thunberg's school strike for climate protests to social media campaigns that are led by various student organizations around the world. It is clear that more and more people are actually stepping up to combat climate change, and we as individuals have adopted sustainable habits such as recycling, reducing, reusing our waste, commuting via public transport, limiting our electricity and water consumption, and many more. Aside from just being eco-friendly, these practices have allowed us to appreciate and protect the planet that we live on far better. But this isn't enough. The industrial nature of the world has significantly prohibited our ability to meet those requirements established during the Paris Agreement. Now, this is where we draw the line between micro and macro changes. Although it is important for us to disseminate knowledge regarding climate change to the public and for us to change our lifestyles to be more sustainable, the progress that we can make as individuals is incremental. According to the Carbon Majors report in 2017, just 100 companies have been the source of more than 70% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions since 1988. These multinational corporations, so-called carbon majors, derive their entire profitability from producing oil, coal, and natural gases for the world's energy-dependent societies. Now, fossil fuels account for about 84% of the world's primary energy consumption. So this means that no matter how much we try to reduce our electricity consumption or consume vegan products or spread awareness, without structural change in the way that we as humanity produce energy, the likelihood of us turning around the climate crisis to a net zero GHG emissions scenario is incredibly low. To quantify this extent of personal action, the International Energy Agency estimated that individual behavioral changes would only account for 4% of the necessary GHG reduction for a path to a net zero emissions energy system by 2050. To reach the requirements that we have put upon ourselves to keep our global warming below 1.5 degrees Celsius, personal action has to be paired with collective action and meaningful climate solutions. I believe that the way we as individuals engage with the conversation surrounding climate change should progress past just becoming more eco-friendly or even demanding the culpability of governments and corporations. For youth to be meaningfully engaged in the climate crisis, I believe that we should be educated about climate change not only as a socio-political issue, but also as a scientific one. So what are the alternatives here? Macro changes in the form of effective solutions for climate change. This includes the development and application of industrial innovation, renewable energy technologies, carbon removal techniques, and many more out-of-the-box solutions. Now, often the first climate change solutions that people can think of is renewable energy, and rightfully so. Currently, the biggest contributor to climate change is humanity's huge overdependence on the use of fossil fuels for energy. So achieving net zero emissions by 2050 will require nothing short of the complete transformation, the complete uprootal of the global energy system. Thus, renewable energy technologies that harness the virtually inexhaustible resources on Earth, such as sun, wind, and biomass, are the keys to reducing emissions in the electricity sector. But there are a few problems that need to be addressed with renewable energy. Firstly is the availability of power. Now, the biggest infrastructural problem with renewable energy is intermittency. This means that renewable energy sources cannot always consistently produce energy at all hours of the day, as they are affected by environmental cycles that can limit their use or efficiency. For example, wind power is only generated when it's windy, solar power is only generated when it's sunny. However, High-capacity batteries capable of storing large quantities of power solve the problem, as they store energy produced by wind turbines and solar panels, etc. during their peak efficiency cycles, and then they tap into those reserves when the cycles dip. And thus the development of electricity storage batteries will allow renewable energy to be less expensive and more efficient. This is just one solution. But secondly, is the unequal access to energy in global and local communities. Now, in the global supply chain, high-value resources such as oil, gas, and biofuels are sourced from less developed countries for the benefit of wealthier populations. Now, within the countries, national governments often prioritize linking only the wealthy and the middle-class communities to the electrical grid over poor or rural communities. In the Gir districts of my hometown, Ulaanbaatar, for example, residents have no choice but to burn coal for heat just to stay alive during the coldest times of winter. This causes average air pollution levels to reach up to 27 times the level that the World Health Organization recommends as safe. This excessive air pollution is not only bad for the environment, but also causes respiratory diseases such as pneumonia and bronchitis, adversely affecting the poor who can't afford to be hospitalized or medicated when they're sick. However, introducing clean, free, and efficient renewable energy sources to poor or rural communities can make energy access more equitable. But we need more people investing in and advancing the renewable energy sector for it to be accessible enough for all people, regardless of their income, to reap their benefits. So then, what can we do? Firstly, we need to continue to have sustainable habits. Although looking at the climate crisis through a macro lens is important, we must not abandon our sense of responsibility when it comes to the climate crisis. Now, climate action starts from small things like recycling your paper, turning off your lights, using reusable straws even. But it grows into something beyond just you. It grows to the bigger scheme of things. Secondly, educate yourself about climate change through the resources that are available to the public. For example, if you're interested in learning about climate solutions through a more scientific perspective, there's a 12-course online climate education program provided by Climate Science Organization for free online. Other credible and accurate sources of information include reports and roadmaps published by organizations such as the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, International Energy Agency, Carbon Market Watch, and many more credible sources. Thirdly, contact clubs or non-governmental organizations that focus on climate change solutions. You can do voluntary work in your community that tackles specific climate change or environmental degradation issues, such as pollution, for example. Now, by doing this, not only do you protect your local environment, your local community, but you gain a sense of belonging in the bigger picture of climate action. Fourthly, consider entering climate professions. An increasing number of colleges and universities around the world offer degrees that specifically focus on environmental and climate sciences. That doesn't mean you have to become a meteorologist or even an environmental scientist just to contribute to climate action. The reality is that climate change affects just about every area of our lives, from our ability to stay warm or cool to the food we eat. This means that you can break into a climate-conscious career in almost any path. You can be a sustainability consultant, an environmental lawyer, a sustainable fashion designer. The opportunities are essentially boundless. As we youth become more interested in sustainable development and climate action, calling for systemic change on the part of corporations and governments, the future of the climate crisis depends on how we act. I encourage you to think about what meaningful climate action means to you and how you can contribute to the future of the climate crisis. Thank you very much.